All the conversation about that test match was dominated by the fact that you couldn't have tickets, that there was going to be a record audience. So it became about the cult of personality being stamped out under the guise of what you call diplomacy or cricket diplomacy. What India and Australia are not at war. Cricket Australia is acting on behalf of its fans, but the Gujarat Cricket Association or the BCCI is not doing anything for Indians fans because by and large they don't think much of Indian fans. I don't think anyone in cricket journalism per se is afraid of the BCCI or BCCI officials, but their editors don't want to get into any panga for no reason. They don't want to be involved in anything that might upset a political boss. I think mainstream media has basically ceded a lot of ground. Their editorship and their management has just what you say in Hindi is just laid down weapons, basically, not like whatever.
What are we lacking here? I mean, what is
courage?
Courage.
I think courage at people at the very top, because I think the stakes for them are so high. I think reporters on the ground are willing to do what they're willing to do. I think people at the top, stakes are so high and they're so worried about their positions that they don't have the guts to put this thing out.
It is a cliche to say that cricket and politics are like the staple diet of majority of the Indians. But what happens when the line between the both begins to blur and cricket starts to become a ground for political parties to push their agenda? To speak about this and more, I am joined by veteran sports journalist and writer Sharda Ugra, whose body of work goes beyond just match reports and statistics. Welcome, Sharda. So, getting off the mark with the first question, that is on cricket diplomacy, which is the talk of the town at the moment. So, I mean, cricket diplomacy is not new in Indian politics, right? I mean, we've seen it in the past as well. In fact, in 2011, we saw it during the 2011 World Cup when the then Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and Pakistan Prime Minister was present during the semi-final clash. Do you feel that it is any different this time when Modi and the Australian Prime Minister was present at the Narendra Modi Stadium during the first day of the India-Australia Test match?
I think it's cricket diplomacy has always existed to pursue a sort of a national external affairs sort of theme idea during the middle of a cricket match and to talk about it. So, for example, when you had it in 2011, it was about India-Pakistan friendship and collaboration and conversation. The difference between what happened then and what happened now is that for the first time, India-Australia cricket friendship, 75 years of friendship became about projecting the personalities of the prime ministers, and primarily the Indian prime minister personality bigger than Anthony Albanese, because of course the Indian prime minister is everywhere in the public space in India. So that was the main difference. And the point is that these cricket diplomacy sort of events, when they happen, what you usually see is that the dignitaries will go out during just before the game, before the toss, they'll shake hands, they'll meet everybody. Like the Indian captain will introduce the prime minister from both countries to their team, and the same thing will happen with the opposition team captain. Here it became part of a political rally. It was a package that was there that dominated all the conversation about that test match was dominated by the fact that you couldn't have tickets, that there was going to be a record audience. So it became about the cult of personality being stamped out under the guise of what you call diplomacy or cricket diplomacy. What India and Australia are not at war.
Right.
There's no need for there to be huge diplomatic sort of gestures in a sense. And just very quickly, that also there was going to be a strategic announcement that could have been made when the announcement is to be made.
Right.
So many things had come into this to make this about the cult of personality and the cult of the Indian Prime Minister.
In fact, if you've read Australian journalist Gideon Higgs' report, right, and I think he had mentioned that this was a quote unquote cricket match in between a political rally. So I think this was actually voiced out by several other foreign journalists as well, right? And I was following many of the discussions on social media, and people were questioning why Indian cricket journalists, in fact, were not very vocal about what is happening, because right, like you said, a lot of tickets, there are reports about tickets being sold to party workers, because of which many of the Australian fans or even Indian fans for that matter were not able to get it. So why do you think that the Indian journalists were very felt
I
about
think
this?
you have to sort of make a distinction between the journalists on the ground that were there, the Indian reporters, the journalists. The story about the tickets not being available, the tickets being locked out for local fans and for the Australian visitors, visiting fans as well, was broken by a local reporter in a local newspaper. Right? It
Right.
started from that,
Correct.
and because that reporter did his job, the newspaper published it. A lot of the cricket reporters that were there, we don't know what instructions they were given by their management about whether to write about this or not. Right? We have no idea. I know that there were stories that appeared, a couple of stories about these tickets. And only when the news of the ticket being locked out was made public, was there some stir about the Australian fans saying, what about our tickets? And they said there'll be a Cricket Australia acted on behalf of their fans
Right.
and said, listen, there'll be a booth open for you to get tickets. And it's absurd that Cricket Australia is acting on behalf of its fans, but the the Gujarat Cricket Association or the BCCI is not doing anything for Indian fans because by and large they don't think much of Indian fans. They don't think that fan requirements or necessities are anything to be bothered about. So you saw that playing itself out. And I have to speak on defense of the reporters, saying that I know that there were reporters there, Indian reporters there, who would have liked to have written about this, chased the story up, followed it in detail. But I'm not sure they would have been allowed by their managements to do so.
Right.
You know, the editors to
Now
do
that
so.
you brought about the management side, okay. So there is this talk that, like, you know how political journalists are usually censored,
Yes.
and now there's this talk about how maybe sports journalists are also, or media organization. I'm not talking about reporters per se, but their management would not want to get on the wrong side or the bad books of the powerful sports bodies. I'm not just talking about cricket, but in all other places, because politicians are involved everywhere, so they do not want to have. So do you think that there is a self-censoring happening within sports journalism as well in India?
I think politicians have always been involved in sports. They've always been there across various parties. There is a certain change that has taken place. Is that the ruling dispensation is very sort of conscious of how it's projected, and their part in all sort of sports politics that happened is not written about much. It's sort of glossed over because the consequences of writing something about the political party, in the party in power, editors feel scared. You know, they don't. Let's not say they feel scared. They don't want the hassle. So, and that happens across the board. The editor will tell the business editor, the political editor, the business editor, the sports editor, like, listen, just back off from this topic. We don't want to be getting phone calls from people. So, of course, there is a self-censorship that's happening. It's very disappointing.
So there is a climate of fear among journalists as well.
100%.
So,
I don't think
yeah.
anyone in cricket journalism per se is afraid of the BCCI or BCCI officials, but their editors don't want to get into any panga for no reason. They don't want to be involved in anything that might upset a political boss, because now the political bosses are fully much more invested in cricket unilaterally, almost, if you can use that phrase, than they were in the past, because there used to be cross-party political involvement now.
No, but is this a recent phenomenon, or has it always been this way ever since, you know, BCCI became a powerful body, or is it just a recent phenomenon?
What happened? The people in the BCCI will tell you that there were politicians in the BCCI from across various parties, and there was politics in the BCCI. But the impact of contemporary political life was not felt on cricket. You know, there's a point at which the BCCI president could tell the External Affairs Ministry that if you want us to cancel a tour to Pakistan, don't tell us to pull out, you cancel it. That's the kind of clout that the BCCI was able to carry and have this conversation. This is not very recently, this is at least, I think, 15, 18, 20 years ago is what happened, even older. So that kind of independent functioning is not there in the BCCI anymore. That you will fight for the cause of cricket. That is not there anymore in the BCCI.
No,
You know,
as a sports journalist yourself, in this climate of fear, where do you see the standing of a sports journalist? How do you see the future of sports journalism? I mean, do you, apart from just reporting on match reports and day-to-day happenings, how do you see sports journalism going forward?
It's quite frightening, I think, for young. At this time, when I look at it, I worry about what younger sports journalists will do, about how they write, the kind of freedoms that they enjoy. But what is happening is that there are parallel spaces that are opening up. I don't know whether they are parallel spaces that will give monetary benefits to the journalists that do it, like, you know, jobs and salaries kind of a thing. But there are parallel spaces opening up where people are able to write and discuss, and through social media or through websites like yours or any other, Scroll or whatever the wire, they're able to put out these thoughts there and to write about these things. I think mainstream media has basically ceded a lot of ground. their editorship and their management has just what you say in Hindi is just laid down weapons, basically, like whatever, laid down arms. And I don't think, because of whatever the reasons up the ladder, I mean, to my absolute disappointment, and I can say so, is that I saw India Today's latest cover story is about the economy of domestic pets and how that, so you're just looking and saying which country is being lived in at the moment. It's quite scary. And so sports is literally at the end of the line in that, and you would want there to be a certain element of freedom of the ability to. I think there is some amount, but cricket is a tough thing because there's a real investment, and cricket is big money, so everyone's got their fingers into it.
No, I was just wondering, because when an incident like this happens, right, a journalist has broke a story saying that, okay, around 80,000 tickets from the Ahmedabad Narendra Modi stadium was sold to party workers and not to fans who wanted to watch the match. On any other normal day, wouldn't this have been a major story?
Headline news.
Especially
Headline
in
news
a
on television.
Definitely.
Main news, breaking news.
So what are we lacking here? I mean, what is
courage?
Courage.
I think courage at people at the very top, because I think the stakes for them are so high. I think reporters on the ground are willing to do what they're willing to do. I think the people at the top, stakes are so high and they're so worried about their positions that they don't have the guts to put this thing out there. They don't have the guts to say, let's be able to print this story, let's publish it, let's go with what our reporter is telling us, let's trust the reporter, let's push the boundary a little. I don't think they, particularly in sports journalism, I look at the pages and I'm just holding my head and saying, please, what is going on? It's quite sad. It's quite sad. And it's like that lack of courage just permeates through all the way across the newsroom, various departments heads, beats, everything.
So this was a question that I wanted to ask, actually. I mean, do you feel that there is a gap in exploring more stories apart from your day-to-day match reports and statistics, right? I'm talking about, I know there we already have those stories where we write about, okay, a person from a small town and their journey. But apart from that, there are systematic issues in athletic bodies, and other issues when it comes to athletes and infrastructure. So do you think there is a gap in sports reporting when it comes to this?
I think there has been the gap in sports reporting that there was has certainly been bridged now. There is a lot of other avenues. You may not find it in mainstream press that much, but there are a lot of other avenues where you are able to do all kinds of stories. I think, for example, the story of the wrestlers that came up very recently, that was pursued. But you wanted to know if there's anybody doing the kind of follow-up story on this kind of harassment across sport, across disciplines, across sporting bodies. Is that happening? Is anyone questioning what's happening in cricket? You would think that there are things that are going on under the ground at a small level, because there is certainly an energy, and there is certainly amongst young journalists, there is certainly an energy, and there's a certain a desire to be able to call out injustices in some form. And I think the nature of sports journalism itself has changed because of television, that you don't want to write the same story that everybody's seeing on TV anyway. You have to write something that's different, something that's a little bit so you take another angle, and then you explore various things that are there in sport. I think there's certainly room for that. But when something big happens, particularly in something like cricket, then everybody kind of backs off silently. Right. There was, for example, and I'll also give you another example of political involvement and so on, is when the Indian Olympic Association set up its athletes commission, which is a rare thing that athletes were given to have their own commission, it ended up being a complete eyewash. And we have heard crazy stories about what happened. All kinds of sports administrators and politicians were involved in making sure that about 30, 40 names that were given as belonging to people who are going to stand for election on that commission, they all went away, and the election was unanimous. So every time there's a unanimous election in a sports body, I think every sports reporter knows that it's a con job.
Right. See, it amuses me, because cricket is such a powerful tool in a country like India. But in the past, cricket has also been, I've been reading C.L. James, cricket philosopher like C.L. James, who have spoken about how West Indies have, or even countries like South Africa have used cricket as a political weapon, right, against racism and all of that. Do you ever see? I mean, it has not happened till now, but do you see such cricket being used as a political weapon against discrimination based on caste or communalism back home in India? And also the thing is, because this is also to say that Indian cricketers do take the knee when they are playing against racism, right? So why are they shying away from taking a stand when it comes to issues in their own backyard?
I think they are a bit worried about the environment in which they are. I think they are a bit worried about their because cricket is such a big game, and because anyone if they are suddenly removed from the position that they're in, not immediately because that's too obvious, in a few months later lose a contract, they're worried about their income and their livelihood. And there's something, but like somebody said, they've made enough money to be able to stand. A lot of them at the top have made enough money to be able to stand up and speak in public about these things. So about a year and a bit ago, I did a story about. When there was like tear gas in the library, what I called. I said, look, these are cricket fans. These are young kids being attacked by the cops, and people did not. Yes, in Jamia, in JNU, and all, people did not want. Cricketers did not want to speak about it. The very few people spoke. They just worry too much about. They just want to keep the status quo. They want to look after their little patch of land.
Because I remember at that time, I think this was during the farmers' protest, because hockey players and even football players.
One cricketer, Mandeep Singh, Punjab,
yes, had taken a stand on that.
Yeah. So, I think there is certain worry that let's not involved in it. We are not political. Of course, you're political. Everything is political. That's there. And so when Virat Kohli spoke up for Mohammad Shami,
correct.
It was a very big thing.
And, and he had to face the brunt of it as well, right?
Yeah. We have not been able to establish whether there's any actual relation to the fact that he spoke about Shami and then he lost the captaincy.
We don't know it.
We don't know it as yet, but it happened. That's the sequence of events that took place.
Right.
So it was an important thing. And it's important. You would want cricketers to speak for their teammates at least. Right. So Shami got heckled during the test match in Ahmedabad, and there was just silence.
There were Jai Shri Ram chants.
There was silence. Right. There was nobody who stood up and said like, "Hello, why are you doing this? What are you trying to say? What's going?" Somebody to stand up. So it's almost like that because they live in a bubble and they work in a bubble, they think that bubble is going to be bulletproof forever. They're going to be like that forever. So it's very sad. It's happened across every field of in Indian cricket, particularly in media. People don't speak in commentary. Or people speak and then they don't write what they feel. And it's quite a sad situation. It's very obvious. It's become a bit anodyne. And you keep hoping that someone will stand up and someone will speak and something will happen. And, So because there's so much of money involved and the market is so big, people think that that's the only thing worth fighting for, caring about.
Right. Sharda, coming back to journalism, right? I've been reading your articles and you have been vocal about a lot of issues apart from just matches, right? So just now you have spoken about how a lot of reporters shy away from taking them because of the management pressure. Yeah. And journalism as it is a tough job. Being a woman journalist is difficult. Being a woman journalist in sports can be even more difficult, right? And you've had a long record. You've been working for over 3 decades. Have you had to face any issues where you are being sidelined because you are a woman and also because of the stance that you have taken on various issues? Have you ever felt that?
Not fortunately, no. I would have to say that I had worked for a very long time, that I was able to fight for some things that I wanted to be published or written about.
No, even during your initial
when I was young, at that time when you start out young, which is what I say to all younger reporters, that just do your reporting, just do your report as best as you can about everything that you can, as fairly and accurately as you can, and don't pick every fight, because when the time will come to pick a fight is when you're older and you're more established, then you can pick whatever fight you like. There's no point in fighting with everything. Just build your career a little bit. But now they're not even, people are not even helping younger sports journalists build careers because sports departments are being decimated and editors are behaving the way they're behaving. And so a couple of things you will, I had written a story. I was made to write a story in one particular place. And then I knew at that point that this is the job I have to leave. I can't do this again. Yeah. It was one time where I was really angry about having to write a particular thing. But it had to be done. I was part of a big team that was there and everything. And I said, this is it. I'm out of that place. And so it does happen. I've been fortunate that it's not happened a lot. And now because I work independently, I'm fine. I can put whatever I want to write in whichever place will publish it.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of complaint made that why did not Indian reporters write about this whole political diplomacy thing? He said we were itching to write, but who will publish, So you have to find someone who will publish.
Right. Sticking on with journalism, what are your thoughts about women athletes or women sports being reported? Because there's a lot of talk about how women in athletes or women's sports, especially in cricket, right? Women's cricket are not being given enough importance by the mainstream media, because of which why initially boards were hesitant to start a women's Premier League or any of that. Now we do have one. But what I thought, generally, not just cricket, but about women reports on women's sports.
I'll just come to the point that you made about cricket, saying because there was not
People turning up
people
and revenue. There's a
what,
lack of
yeah.
revenue.
But it's not. I keep saying it's not the job of cricketers to make revenue. It's the job of the boards to figure out how revenue is to be made.
Okay.
The job of the cricketers, men or women, is to play.
Yeah.
And so that's an excuse that they use because they kept women's cricket in a black hole for about 10 years. Due to largely misogyny and chauvinism and whatever else adjective you want to use. And it's almost like that the women cricketers themselves played so well that you couldn't ignore them anymore. The moment they came on television, they produced a great performance in the World Cup in 2017, and then things have changed from there. In women's sport in the last 25 years has changed completely. Last 23 years, say in this millennium, has changed completely in the fact that there are many more women athletes whose success stories are told and they are there for us to see. And that whole notion of what sport they should take part in or not take part in, that is all now been banished. You've got boxers, wrestlers, women taking part in combat sports. So that has changed a lot. So there's greater presence of them on
the media, right?
in the media.
Yeah.
You'll see a lot more than it was previously. And in badminton particularly, the women led the way before the men sort of came into their own in the last, say, 5-10 years or so. So you had Saina and you had Sindhu, and so you have all these changes that have taken place, and the way women's stories are told is pretty much the way men's stories are told. But there are many other angles that you can pursue with regard to women's sport, which you would hope that in the next, say, decade or so, that will start.
I think. Do you think there's a change coming in with the way sports bodies are also addressing it? I mean, in a sense that now cricket, we don't use, say, batsman, or we don't say man of the match. We say batter, player of the match.
Yes.
So is that a welcome step as well?
I think that's great
Yeah.
because I think there has been an understanding that there has to be an inclusion of the female side of your sport
Yes.
as well. I mean, the Olympics was particularly very. They always talked about having a games that was gender equal.
Right.
50% men, 50% women. They were pushing for that. That's what I think Paris will be, or maybe Tokyo was. I'm not exactly sure. They're there. So it's almost as if sports bodies are not given the choice anymore of how many women will compete. Then you have to have a woman competitor go.
Right.
So that's the thing.
Right.
And in cricket, it's been a bit late for us, but whereas other countries have been much more active about these things, it's been a bit late for us paying attention to the women cricketers and talking about making all kinds of excuses before doing what they've done with the WPL.
I would like to, now that you mentioned WPL, I think I would want to end in a more positive or hopeful note, because after all discussions, finally Women's Premier League is here. Do you see that as a step towards positive direction, at least as far as women's cricket is concerned?
I think it is definitely it's a positive step, and I think what it will do, I'm hoping, I keep saying, I hope it's like a runaway train that they can't stop now.
Right.
Okay. That the kind of money that's coming. If you watch the WPL coverage, there's got different variety of advertising that's happening, which they always have said about women's sport. What I would like to see, in India particular, in our cricket board, I don't think it'll happen, but I would like to see it, is having a separate department that works towards women's cricket only. Right. It's marketing, it's competitions, it's schedule planning, whatever, completely independent, but no chance. But it's a great thing that it's there. And because you've got other parties involved in it, you've got teams from outside. Correct. That are private entrepreneurs who want that team to be successful. Correct. And they will be the ones that will actually be making the change, putting in the money, doing the advertising, and being much more forthcoming. Right. So, and what it's also done, the Premier League, is it has changed the numbers game for what women's team sport looks like in the world. I don't think we've quite understood the idea that the monies that are being offered here are the biggest sums of money that are being offered in women's team sport around the world.
Around the world?
Around the world.
Okay.
It is like, so the WNBA, which is the biggest, the oldest women's league running in the world, is 26 years old. And their highest earning professional salaries per season are number 10 on what the Indian salaries, WPL salaries were. Wow. So it starts at number 10, and that's the WPL, $228,000 a season.
So is this going to push other bodies, sports bodies as well?
I mean, I don't think it'll push Indian sports bodies. They'll have to take a lot to push them. But I think it'll change the narrative of what cricket will automatically become, unless it's already become the most popular women's sport in India. It'll
Right.
make it because of the fact that it's got that money being shown to us at this
Correct,
point.
correct.
I don't think, I don't know whether it'll succeed in the scale at which they want, but I don't think they can turn the clock back on this now. It would be an utter disaster for them if
Right.
they would say that we could make this succeed. It's not possible. You're watching the matches on TV, the crowds are turning up, and they're in the game. And I think just having women play sport and for it being normalized
Right.
is a great thing.
All right. So we do have some hope. Thank you so much, Sharda,
Thank
for
you
all
so
your
much, sir.
insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.